it's Karen Burniston here with a Card Making with Dies video for our October 2020 release blog hop. I'm combining two pop-up dies with this card, our fancy label accordion and then our evergreen pivot panels. And then to show off our new release and how well it combines with our existing pop-up dies, I'm using our holiday house, our fancy winter frames, and our long nature edges. On our Facebook group, the Karen Burniston Pop-Up Peeps, I had a request to revisit this technique that I had done back in my licensing days to see if it could be done with some of our current dies. And since we are now re-releasing the Holiday House, it's the perfect time. Okay, I'm starting with my fancy label accordion main die. I've cut it 4 times out of a sturdy white cardstock and then a couple more times out of some pattern paper, whichever pattern paper I want for my inner 2 pages to be the background. And for those 2 pattern paper versions, I'm going to cut off the tabs and the inner label and then just glue that over the top of the white label on the 2 pages that I want to be my inner 2 pages. And then from the leftover bit, I can actually get a nice pattern paper frame that will fit the accordion perfectly. So I'm not going to use it on these 2 inner pages, but I'll just set it aside and use it on one of the others. Okay, setting aside the other 2 pages and frames, now it's time to work with my Evergreen Pivot Panels die set. Okay, so I'm going to slide the die from the right under the outer frame so that it's going to cut into the main label, but I'm only going to cut up to that score line. So looking on the back, I want to make sure that I have it centered and placed properly. You are definitely going to want some removable tape to hold that die in place so that it doesn't shift. Let's look at placement. Right here in the center tip, it should come right up to that score line. And then I'm just evening out on the side so that it looks like the same amount of that little corner is going to cut. And then I'm going to use temporary tape to hold that in place. Okay, now that it's taped in place, I want to turn that around again and use a die cutting machine. Now you can use any die cutting machine that can accommodate a wafer thin die. Today I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6. Okay, what I want to do is stop the upper cutting pad short. So I want the cutting pad to go just past those little pivot points, the little vertical lines in between the trees there. So see, I've got the edge of the cutting pad just past that little vertical. And then the goal is to get that started in the machine so that the upper cutting pad stays in place and doesn't slip. So just take your time with that. I'm just going to squeeze everything down while I get it started. And then as soon as it clears the edge of that cutting pad, it's going to make a pretty good ka-thunk. And then I can slide the sandwich back out the front end of the machine. Okay, taking a look at what's been cut, just a couple tiny little pieces shaved off the top and the bottom of the fancy label accordion. And then the main cutting that it's done is that it's cut that tree into the edge of the fancy label accordion up to the fold line. So what I want to do is actually just fold it on that line. Now that's 2 layers. It's got a thick cardstock and a pattern paper, so I'm going to use my bone folder just to make sure I get a nice crisp fold. Okay, now I'm moving on to the other page, the right page. So the tab should still be on the right, but this time I'm going to slide the die in from the left side. I'm basically just repeating the same process. So I turn the die over so that I can look at that center little tip and make sure that it's lined up right with the fold line of the die. And then I just center it so that an equal amount is showing out here on the sides. I definitely want to tape that die down well so that it won't shift as I die cut it. And then doing the same thing again where I put that in the die cutting machine and I stop the top cutting pad short. So the top cutting pad is going to come just past that little vertical line that's the pivot points of the Evergreen pivot panels. And then just making sure that I squeeze that so it doesn't move, get it started in my machine. As soon as it clears the cutting pad, I can slide it back out the front of the machine again and remove the die. Okay, so just removing those little slivers that were cut at the top and the bottom, getting the tape off of there. And then for the tree itself, it folds to the back. And once again, I'll just use my bone folder to make sure that I get a nice crisp fold. Okay, the way this is going to work for these center 2 pages is the labels are going to pivot on their own little pivot points right here. So the tree side is coming forward on both pages. So for this one, I pivot this way so that the tree side comes forward. And then I'm going to use the long tab in the back to join those pages together, and eventually the short tabs in the front to join the tree section together. Okay, but starting first with the long tabs, I want to go ahead and work those long tabs on both pages. Okay, so it's the tab between the two pages that's going to join them, and you can use any type of strong adhesive. I like my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle, and we do sell both of those items on our website. Okay, so then once I have glue on the tab, I'm taking the right page, laying it face down on the left page, and then just lining up the corners so that I can fold over that tab onto the back of the second page, and I have everything lined up really nicely. So then when I open it up, you can see here that I have the two pages joined together. Okay, back to the fancy label accordion again and more pattern paper. I'll keep the inner labels and I've trimmed out the outer frames so that those can be glued on. And for those frames, I usually cut a little bit more off of the edge that's going to go into that valley fold so that the paper doesn't bunch. Okay, I've cut the Evergreen pivot panels out of a sturdy pattern paper, and what I'm going to do here is isolate just the trees. Okay, so I want to locate the little pivot sections, the little pivot points between the trees, so those little vertical sections here and here, because what I'm actually going to do is remove the entire upper and lower part of the pop-up. So I just wanted to find where those little pivot points are, then I'll take my scissors and just kind of keeping in the same angle as the tree, then go down and essentially connect the two sections together so that the upper portion just falls right off. And then same thing at the bottom. I can actually start from the trunk of this tree and then cut over and remove it, and then do the same on the other side. So wherever the pivot point is, and then just kind of connect it up with the trunk of the next tree. And now I have a line of 6 trees with a fold in the middle. In the Evergreen Pivot Panels die set, you get 2 matching trees, but they have different embossed stencil features on them. So one of them has the squiggly lines and one of them has the polka dots. And you can either emboss or stencil or both on those if you want to add a little decoration to the trees. Okay, from the fancy label accordion, I've gone down a label to the first decorator die. And then from this, I'm actually going to cut the corners into a couple of hills just so that my decorator trees that are in the background won't be floating. One of the new dies in our October release is our long nature edges. That's a nice long stitched hill that can be used to decorate an entire slimline card at one time. But what's nice about it being a long die is that I can actually take both of these half labels and cut them at the same time, just finding a spot for each half that gives me that kind of swoopy corner section. Now I cut them at that kind of downward swoopy angle so that it would stay away from the sections that have been cut where the trees are. And then onto those snowbanks, I'm going to add 3 trees on each side, the little decorator trees, and then a couple of snowflakes. The snowflakes come included in the Evergreen Pivot Panels die set. Okay, once that decorating is done, then I can go ahead and add my adhesive to my little tabs that connect the 2 labels together. So just adding that adhesive and then lining up each side and pressing those tabs together. Okay, so now I have my center section of my 4-page fancy accordion. You can see that those trees are kind of folded to the back. Those are what's going to hold my little line of pop-up trees. Okay, I've glued on my 4 decorator trees, and then it's a vertical score line right there, but rather than cut on the vertical, I'm going to take a pencil and then just draw on as though I had a nice big shadow layer around that decorator tree. So just drawing in the bumps as though that were a shadow layer. Then I can fold the piece in half, back fold it so that I can still see my lines to cut. So then after cutting on my lines, I can erase the pencil lines and then open up the piece, and then I'll have that pretty kind of outer shadow layer look to the outer 2 trees. So this little line of 4 trees is going to sit in and glue to those 2 trees that are cut into the fancy label accordion. Okay, so just adding my glue all over that tree that's been cut into the fancy label accordion, then I like to work 1/2 at a time. So that's the right tree, so I'm going to use the inner tree on the right side, and then it should just line up perfectly with that one that's been cut into the accordion. So really easy then to line that up. Okay, and then once that glue sets up, then I can just tilt the piece forward to get access to the other tree. And then I want to add the adhesive all over that tree and then press the other inner pop-up tree to it. Okay, so that is essentially the technique of cutting the evergreen pivot panels into the fancy label accordion. And you can see you kind of have that double pop-up, and then it will still all close down flat. I am making a 4-page accordion today, but this would be really pretty as just a little 2-pager. You could cut off the tabs on the right, decorate the front, and you'd be done. Another new die set in our October release is our fancy winter frames. So I'm going to use the polka dot version on the right page. I wasn't thinking that I was going to put them here. I was thinking I was going to put them on page 4, but then I decided that the red looked a lot nicer against the pink. So the nice thing about this being 4 individual pieces is that I can add them to that page even though I've already assembled the accordion on the inside, because I'll be able to slide them in. Now the way that our fancy frame edges work is that they have easy alignment corners. So you just take the very tip, the outer tip of the frame, all the way to the corner of the page, and then that will center everything for you. And you just do that on all 4 sides. Okay, so there's my polka dot frame added onto that page. For page 4, I've just combined the dies that I'm using on this project to make a little embellishment, and then used our Merry Christmas from our word set 3 to add a greeting. This is the final page in my accordion, so I've gone ahead and cut off the tabs, both the long tab on the right and the small tabs next to the label. I still have the tabs attached to the right side of my inner 2 pages, and those are what will be used to connect this final page to the project. So I'll use the long tab first to connect the outer frames. Okay, then once those are connected, I can take my inner label and pivot it so that the left side is pivoted into the album, and then it'll be those small tabs that will connect those pages together. So this is just usual fancy label accordion assembly, using the small tabs to connect the labels together. And then they basically fold opposite to the outer frame, so you kind of have a back and forth zigzags going on when you fold it up. And this would also make a pretty little 3-page album, so it doesn't necessarily have to be 4. But I do want it to be a 4-page album, so I've made my first page, and I've done that using our new Holiday House decorator die, plus the snowflakes edger from the fancy winter frames. And you can see that I've left the tabs on this page because I'm going to need them to attach them to the project. Okay, speeding this up because this is normal fancy label accordion assembly. The long tab is used to connect the outer frames, and then it is the short tabs that are used to connect the labels. So for this assembly, the first label page, the one that has the Holiday House on it, actually collapses into the album, so you don't see it in the closed position. You basically have the back of that label to decorate. So I just used a combination of the same dies and colors to create a little snowy tree scene label for the front of the card. And then to spruce up the back of the chimney, because you could see it on the front of the card, I just added a pink glitter snowflake to the chimney itself. So then when the card opens, the snowflake moves as well. And then since I had a lot going on the inside of the card, I added a decorator label to the back, and that can be the place that I can write my personal greeting. So I just went stash diving for all of these papers. These are just older papers out of my stash. I just liked the combination of kind of the teal and pink and the red and the green. But definitely try it in some more traditional Christmas colors. That would be pretty. Or maybe some blues and whites, and it could be a winter card. The fancy label accordion folds down into a square that's just about 4 3/4 inch, so it will fit nicely in an A7 envelope for mailing. However, this one, the 4-pager with the extra pop-up in the middle, it has some thickness to it, so most likely you are going to need extra postage. Check the description box below this YouTube video for a link to the blog post. This is part of a hop, so you will find other projects using our new dies made by our very talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can find out information about purchasing these dies, as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.